boxing, straight boxing, but not that great. I would do a lot better at the bare knuckle rules with the dirty boxing.
Yeah.
Hold on to the gun.
Yeah, it's very different. It's I really like what Jorge Masvidal's doing, where he's got bare knuckle MMA. It just shows you that when you don't have, first of all, grappling is way better because you don't have the padding over your gloves that prevents certain chokes. It just like it gets in the way of stuff. But also it's more realistic. You know, like your hands, like I think we talked about this before. I think it was Tank Abbott. It was the first guy who figured out that if you wear MMA gloves, you actually can punch. You're not worried as much about breaking your hands. Yeah. Wrap your hands up, put gloves on, and it's not a disadvantage. It's kind of an advantage.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily protect your opponent that much. It really protects your hands.
Right. No, I agree.
Yeah.
For sure.
But it just seems to me weird that, you know, your elbows are unprotected, your knees are unprotected, your shins are unprotected. You can go bone to bone with that, but not with your hands. Just seems like it doesn't really make sense.
Right. And when they first started UFC, there was no gloves, and that's how it was. And when they started wearing gloves, and that was my thoughts, they're more to protect your hands than, you know, I guess without your hands, if your hands break, then the fight kind of doesn't happen as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how effective it is too. Like Mike Perry has done an amazing job transitioning into he's probably the most successful at it. Definitely the most successful at it from MMA guys.
Right. Yeah, I saw him with Luke Rockhold. Knock some teeth out.
Yeah, I mean, when it's just raw knuckle on your face, like a regular mouthpiece, it's not quite good enough.
Right.
And it's interesting that guys are still using the upper mouth only with bare knuckle. I would think you might want to use an upper and a lower.
Yeah, I always just did the upper.
Yeah, most people do. I mean, very few people with an upper and a lower, right? I don't think anybody.
Not that I know of.
Not that I know of. In boxing, you used to see it. You used to see guys who had like a full mouthpiece, but it just gets in the way of your breathing too much.
That's what I have a problem with.
Yeah. Do you breathe out of your nose? Can your nose work?
My nose works fine.
Well, a lot of guys.
Yeah. I started snoring, and so I went and got a sleep test. But they went in and
cleaned it up.
They put a scope up to see how my nose was, because they, you know, just like you, they thought my nose couldn't breathe.
Right.
And he said it was completely clear. No, it was all good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing that you haven't had too many big injuries. I know you broke your hand at least once, right? Was that the Vanderlei fight? Yeah. That was a wild one.
That was in the first round I broke it.
Wow.
So I just remember going back to the corner, shaking my hand hurts, and they started talking about something else, what I needed to do, and then I never thought about it again the rest of the fight.
Wow.
And I was throwing it. So I you know, it just, the adrenaline or whatever I had in me, just didn't even feel it again.
You got some wild highlight reel knockouts. Wild fights. I remember the first fight I ever saw of yours, I think it was in 1997. I think you just posted it on Instagram, or someone did. It's like me interviewing you backstage.
Yeah.
Like right after the fight. 97.
That was in 97?
I think so. I'm pretty sure. That was when I first started your UFC. I think that was a tournament back then. Yeah, what year is that? Does it say?
Oh, shit.
UFC 17.
It was 17, yeah. That was, 1997. No, wow. 98.
98.
I fought in 97 in Brazil in a tournament and some money to keep wrestling, and then I did the UFC a year later.
Who talked you into doing MMA in the first place?
Well, you know, Randy and I were training partners forever, wrestling, and, you know, we'd always watched it on TV and said, you know, that'd be fun, but I don't know if I'd want to get in there with some of those 3-4ers, you know,
right.
Those big fuckers. And Randy called me up one day and said, hey, I'm doing this tournament down in Brazil at heavyweight, and they got a lightweight tournament 2 weeks before. And you want to go do the lightweight tournament, which is like, it was like 176 or something. And I was like, well, I was wrestling 180 and a half at the time, so it was an extra 5 pounds, but, you know, I went down and did it. But in the meantime, Randy had already put an application into the UFC, and they said no, and which I didn't know he put in the application. He got a call, somebody got hurt, so he didn't go down to Brazil. He went to the UFC instead. It was like within a week before, a week after that fight. No, but the one down in Brazil, which was, I think it was UFC 13 was his first one. And I
was there for that too.
A tournament against the two big heavyweights.
Yeah, he fought some big muscular guy the first fight who
Right.
had a lot of hype on him, and I fought in his second fight. I don't remember, but that was like when we first started seeing elite wrestlers.
Right.
First started seeing a guy, Royce Alger, Coleman, all those.
Did Kenny Monday fight in the UFC or did
Yes.
Yeah.
Kenny no, was it Jackson?
Jackson.
Kenny Monday fought. He fought submission. I remember Matt Hume submitted him.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
That was I think wrestled with Frank Shamrock.
That's
there.
right.
And I had a screwed up ankle from I rolled it right before the World Championships a month before. So I went in there wearing wrestling shoes so I could hide the tape that I had on my ankle. Frank's pretty good at ankle locks, so
Yeah.
not knowing anything about it.
Well, Frank was really one of the first guys that had like a full overall MMA game.
Right. No, I agree.
Really did. He had submitted Kevin Jackson, like very impressive. He could submit you off his back. He had crazy cardio, full range of skills. He could strike, he could grapple, do everything.
Right.
And the cardio, he was like one of the first guys that showed like cardio could be a weapon, like the Tito Ortiz fight. His cardio was a real weapon.
For sure. And Tito's in good shape, too.
Yeah, well, Tito learned from that fight. I mean, I think that was a big wake-up call for him,
Right.
that how much cardio plays a factor.
Yeah. And it's a different pace from wrestling. So that was something we had to learn. Wrestling was a little bit higher paced, a little more action, shorter durations though.
Right.
So I had to learn to kind of pace myself a little bit when I first started doing this.
When you first started doing this, what were the distance of the rounds? Was it 5-minute rounds?
No. The one down in Brazil, I think, was a 15-minute straight round, and then maybe a 15-minute overtime if there's no submission. Then they go to judges. But I didn't go. I think I went like 7 or 8 minutes. The first fight with Crazio was my first fight. He was like a belt, which I didn't know a whole lot about. After watching that fight again nowadays, it just, I see so many mistakes that I did, and I didn't know how